welcome to our program. This morning, we're going to be talking about the situation in Tanzania, a country that for decades was considered a model in East Africa of stability and relatively good governance, although the last president did start to exhibit some autocratic traits. And the recent election has brought this out again. The current president, who was vice president, started off well, and then when this election, we seem to see autocracy raising its ugly head. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get to that, I want to welcome our audience and point out that while these are free to you to participate in and to ask questions or provide your input, they're not free to us. We rely on the support of people like you to be able to bring you these discussions, and to encourage those of you who are not members of FPRI, consider a membership. If you don't want to consider a membership, consider maybe a small donation to the Africa program so that we can keep going. This morning, while our guest panelist is talking, if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer box, which you find at the bottom of your screen. Don't put them in the chat box because we might miss them. At about the halfway point, we'll take your questions and get to as many of them as possible. Our guest this morning is Ms. Iman Hatibu, who is a lawyer with extensive experience in human rights advocacy and sustainable development. She's dedicated a lot of her career to advancing good governance, democracy, peace, and security. She's going to talk to us for a few minutes about the situation in Tanzania, how it got to where it is, and what she thinks the way forward might be. For that, I will turn it over to you, Ms. Iman Hatibu, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yes, you are. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Charles. Yeah, as you introduced me, my name is Iman Hatibu. I am a Tanzanian, born and raised. So I am really honored to be able to speak out for the vast majority that fear to speak out. And I fear myself. Like I'm not, like I'm shaking right now, but we'll get through this. Yeah, I have been working in Tanzania for the past 12 years around in the non-governmental organization. I worked for an organization called Policy Forum before I moved to the United States last year. And at Policy Forum, we really worked hard to advocate for human rights and policy and reforms and also democratization. So why? In order to enhance the lives of the people of Tanzania. So I was able to get firsthand experience by working with different stakeholders, from the marginalized communities to the government, with the ministries, departments, and agencies of the government of Tanzania. Yes, basically what I would like to say is that we are heartbroken as Tanzanians about the situation that happened in Tanzania post-election, during election day and post-election, and what is also ongoing as a country. It took a while for us to get where we are, but we couldn't avoid it. At some point, like a volcanic mountain, it was about to erupt, and finally it did in 2025 October. And this is because the government and the people, we saw the signs, but we neglected the signs. Tanzania has had a number of disappearances of people. We have a number of kidnappings, killings, cases in courts that are unending cases. Like we witnessed in April, the leader of the opposition party, Tundu Lissu, was put in prison and charged with treason, and his case is still ongoing. We have witnessed a number of killings of people or disappearances, and the government has failed, the parliament especially, has failed to acknowledge the fact that these things are happening in the country. So we are shouting peace. Tanzania is a peaceful country, but yet, how do you rip me of my opportunity, my right to live if we are living in peace? You cannot speak peace if you do not speak about rights. That is one thing that we have to agree. So it was bound to happen. We don't know when, but it was bound to happen because we've had cases where during Magufuli's, President Magufuli, the late President Magufuli's era or his regime, we had cases where people wanted to protest due to the killings and the corruption and everything else that had been going into the country. But we witnessed that the police that was supposed to protect the people came out and said, if you ever dared to protest, we are going to beat you up like stray dogs in public. Okay. So you call it a country that has democracy, but you threaten your people and speak peace. So quite contradictory there, don't you think? And if you see something happening or people are trying to protest your government, why not sit on the table with the people before it actually happens? But yet, the police that is supposed to be the ones that protect us, they go out there and say, do not do it because we are going to annihilate you. Okay? And so by de jure, the police is a body that has to protect peace and security in the country. By de facto, the police will go against anyone or go after anyone who dares to speak against the ruling party. So, yes, we are a peaceful country, but how do you define this peace at the end of the day? So I'd like to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting. You know, it is true what you said. The previous president before his death had become pretty much a hardcore autocrat, in much similar to other autocrats throughout the continent and throughout the world. The thing that I noticed though is that when President Hassan, who was vice president, took over from after the previous president died, she seemed to be taking Tanzania into a new direction. She reached out to the opposition. She basically lifted some of the bans on political meetings that the previous president had put in place. And so it looked, at least initially, that things in Tanzania were going back toward a more democratic, a more representative, participatory type government. But now, with this, with the run up to the election and the violence that took place during election and the post election crackdowns, what we see is that she seems to be going back to what her former boss was doing. How do you explain that? What is your feeling for what caused her to take basically a giant U-turn after heading into a very positive direction at the outset of this completing his term in office? She's starting her new term by going right back in the direction he was going.
So my take on this would be, first of all, when the President Samia was appointed or took power, I was very proud. I stood ground and said, "Wow, first woman president in Tanzania." Despite the circumstances that it happened, we were very hopeful, and she did do quite a lot. She tried to hold dialogues with the opposition, and she brought back people who were say fired or you know from Magufuli's regime, and she did quite a lot, let's say. But when it came to having a democratic and proper dialogue sessions where we would get to a consensus where people would want to change things, that is when it started to go south. Okay. She won the hearts of people by calling all the opposition to place. But then it started to go south when we had to actually do things. Okay. The me having a dialogue with the opposition is more political, but when it came to implementing, that is when the balance started to change. When people started questioning, she felt that that's my take. I feel like she felt that she is being maybe disrespected because she's a female president. And that is what people are saying. They're saying that like people who support the ruling party would come online. One of the things that I do is I publish content online to educate people about their rights and accountability and everything. The people who support the ruling party would come online and say, we are just being against her because she's a female president. We are intimidating her because she's a female. Where were you during Magufuli's regime? But we did question during Magufuli's regime. We did work with the government during Magufuli's regime. It's just the part that when it came to actually implementing, actually making reforms, actually taking, when the opposition party saw that President Samia was understanding and ready to have a dialogue, everybody felt okay, since we were what's that word? We were silenced during Magufuli's era. Here is the time to hold dialogue. Let us move forward. But when it came to actually implementing, that is when everything changed. When it came to actually looking into the concerns that the people have had for numbers of years, then that is what actually changed and say, okay, now let me go back to the same route that maybe they will respect me then. And that is my take.
Hmm, that's interesting. But in addition to the gender issue, which I guess you can't really ignore, the fact that she's from Zanzibar, I believe, and she was the trade minister from Zanzibar. Zanzibar is a unique entity in Tanzania in that it's part of Tanzania, but it's also semi-autonomous, semi-self-governing. Does her being from Zanzibar play any role in maybe her being a little more hardcore in establishing her authority?
Her being from for so my take again, her being from Zanzibar doesn't change the fact that she's from Tanzania, but might change that for her from her perspective because Zanzibar is a component of Tanzania, right? And then it's a like a small I'm not trying to intimidate anyone, but it's a small region in Tanzania. Like it's a part of Tanzania. It's like a country that's governing itself. Let's call it like Puerto Rico, for example. Yeah,
Mm.
that's how Zanzibar is. So they rely on the mainland's army. So it's our army together. Okay. Maybe being a Muslim and being a female leader and being from Zanzibar might sound like intimidating, but it's not. When you follow rule of law, when you're following good governance, all those things, you shouldn't be intimidated from wherever you're from. It shouldn't be like that. If you're following the Constitution, that you're upholding the Constitution that put you into power, then that shouldn't intimidate you.
Interesting. Well, let me ask you this. Is there anyone in Tanzania at the moment who has the credibility or credentials to be able to mediate between the ruling party and the people to launch a mediation process?
I feel like, okay, so it is possible to launch a mediation process, but I feel like there is so much that needs to be done towards that because the mediation, anything that, when something goes south or something goes wrong, a lot needs to be done to get to where they are. So, and forgive me, my fellow Tanzanians, that I didn't acknowledge the loss of thousands of lives of people who lost their lives during the post-election time. So, first of all, there's so much grievances around, and people are not trusting the government. Like we have lost faith. We are heartbroken and lost faith with the government. We feel like being a Tanzanian right now is holding a death sentence onto yourself. like just to speak up. And that might sound harsh, but that's how we feel. Just to speak up, just me being here and speaking to you about what is going on in Tanzania feels like I will be targeted after this. Okay. So t taking us back to mediation, we need to deal with how we feel as citizens because you're apart from you governing the government governing us, we need to be held. We need to feel like we are held. We need to feel like our dignity is a priority to the government. And that's not how we feel right now. We feel like they want to continue with business as usual while thousands of Tanzanians are looking for dead bodies of their loved ones. They want to continue with business as usual while people have disappeared and nobody knows where they are. They want to continue with appointments and everything else while the police is busy threatening Tanzanians from not sharing videos of election time or bodies while people are looking for those bodies. So mediation, yes, it can happen. Yes, somebody can, I don't feel like somebody in Tanzania precisely would come up and people would trust that specific person, but it can happen. It will take time, but the government needs to look at the damage that has already been done and try to clear that first. Try to soothe the hearts of people as as we see a way forward. How will we go forward from where we're at now? You can't just ignore the thousands of Tanzanians. Tens of thousands of people have died, allegedly. I don't have the numbers because no media in Tanzania is reporting this. But why don't we look onto that first? I commend the president for at least acknowledging that people really died during election time. I do. On the 14th of November, when she was addressing the parliament, she she was able to acknowledge that this actually did happen. People did die. Sorry about that. People did die. At least that's a first step. But how do we how do we move forward? Because after the incident happened, the police, when they were questioned or interviewed, they kept on saying that those are videos generated by AI. They stood ground. Bodies have surfaced in different mortuaries, in different hospitals, and the Ministry of Health would come online and say, uh, discard that. It is not true information. Well, people know these places, okay? People have seen their loved ones there. So how do you move forward to mediating anything towards it? Well, people are heartbroken and they can't just move forward. Anybody who has lost their lives deserve a proper burial. Let people bury their loved ones. Let them heal from that. Then we can start to talk about where are we moving on to, like from there onwards. So I don't think anybody right now can come and say, oh, let's try and mediate the people and the government if they're not listening to what the people need at this particular time.
There was an announcement that the president has appointed a commission of inquiry into. I would assume this is into the election and post-election violence. What's the public reaction to that?
Well, how does the body that conducted a crime investigate itself?
Good point. Good
Yes.
point.
You 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 stole, for instance, right? You stole a pen. And then after stealing the pen, you say, "Oh, I'm going to investigate who stole the pen." You won't point fingers at yourself, right? So as long as the person is appointed by the same person who has so much allegations toward them, then nobody is going to trust them. And I'd like to speak to my government if they're watching, if they're in here. You can't correct a wrong with a wrong. You cannot. You have to correct a wrong with a right. If your law enforcement are being pointed fingers at, being told that you're the one who did it, you can't appoint the same people to go and investigate the case. Perhaps if we had an open commission of somebody, let's say ICC or African Union or SADC, perhaps, perhaps would trust that this came from credible sources, but the people of Tanzania are not going to accept. Me, myself, I won't accept an investigation from someone who's appointed by the president or for an investigation from somebody who's appointed by the same people that we are pointing fingers at. So if we got the United Nations, perhaps, or the African Union, yeah, we might be able to trust the reports that will come from them.
That's a good point. You mentioned SADC, the African Union. What has been the reaction from these external bodies to what's going on in Tanzania?
So the African Union had observers that observed the elections in Tanzania. And after the president was inaugurated, I think that's the word, or coronated, I'm not sure. English is not my first language, I'm sorry. After the president was put into power and sworn in, let's use that one. Uh, African Union came out with a statement, a report from the observers on how the election was not free and fair, and that they recommended that they needed to look into it and work upon it. During the swearing in of the president made a speech referring to the speech that was made by the late Benjamin Mkapa, the third president of Tanzania, saying that they have heard the advice that this African Union and these external bodies have given out, but they're not going to work on it. Quote unquote, that is what she said. Okay, these are not my words. So the African Union issued reports on the elections. SADC has issued reports on the elections. And yet, we're turning a blind eye once again that we're not going to work on it. We have heard you, but we're not going to work on it.
Doesn't that though actually forestall these two bodies from being able to come in and do anything to participate to try and mediate things? I mean, if the president in her inauguration address basically said, "We hear you, now go away, we aren't listening to you," what does that what does that say for the ability of AU or SADC to actually play a role in mediating the problems in Tanzania?
Well, I believe that I believe that there's certain mechanisms that they can use as to hold these governments accountable, and that's why our countries are member states. That when you become a member state, you have to uphold the peace of the region, and if your peace is being disturbed, then I believe that the AU is able to intervene. How? I'm not really sure about that. I might have to look into it, but I'm positively sure that they can intervene while your peace, you're unstable politically, or peace is being tampered with.
Okay. Well, we have several questions already from our audience, and so I'm going to go to those. And just following on what we were just talking about, our first question is, what economic pressures could be put on Tanzanian government by Europe, if not the U.S.? I mean, we talked about AU and SADC, but what about the role that Europe and I'm not sure that the U.S. is in a position to actually exert influence in Tanzania, but what do you see as the role that economic pressure from outside the continent
Okay,
might have
so
on it?
thank you. So one of the things is that Tanzania has come into contract or is in contract with several countries in the Europe, let's say Europe. We have double taxation agreements with different countries in Europe. We have companies that have established their companies in Europe. We have countries that have established their companies in Tanzania. That's what I'm trying to say. And if they could interfere, and then we have also We have the embassies there, the Switzerland embassy, and so on and so forth, all of those. They have issued their statements, but then we would like them to look at the agreements that they have in Tanzania, if they can sanction the government somehow with their trade routes, right? If you don't have stability, then if you're not in peace, if you're fighting with your people, or you don't have stability, then we won't be able to follow through with the agreements that we have, and this will disrupt the trade that we are having together, or the agreements that we have come into together. So if they were able to sanction the Tanzanian government and say, you need to fix this before we even continue with our agreements, because one of the key terms, or the key reasons why we are working together, is because Tanzania for many years has been a peaceful country, and Tanzania has so much resources. We are a resource-rich country. We have water bodies, we have minerals from oil, gas, we have lakes, and so much is there, so much potential. It doesn't really reflect to the people, yes, but then a lot of investment is being done by countries in Europe and in the Americas, in Tanzania. And if we are able to say we need peace, if they were able to say we need peace in your country, or else this won't be taking place, then I believe we would stand a chance. The people of Tanzania would stand a chance to be heard for once.
Interesting. We talk about Europe and the US. The other elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned, and I'd like to bring this up, is what role does China play in Tanzania? Is China an economic player in Tanzania? And if so, do the Chinese have any influence over the government?
Well, China is a partner when it comes to trade and construction. Most of the things that we import from anywhere was from, let's say, it's from China. The constructions of the roads in Tanzania are mostly done by the Chinese people. So China is a really big counterpart in Tanzania as well. So they would have a huge role to play in Tanzania as well. I'd say that.
Okay. Another question from the audience. It would be helpful to have a concise description of the key developments which brought us from functioning democracy and good governance to the current pass. I'm not sure that functioning democracy, given the previous president's tenure, is an accurate term. But could you just sort of address that? What brought us to where we are today?
So what brought us to where we are today is the fact that, first of all, the fact that the government has turned a blind eye and a deaf ear, and they do not want to hear anybody else who's giving out even constructive criticism. That's what I would like to say. But what are the people saying? That's how I can put it. The Constitution has given too much authority or power to the president of Tanzania. And why why should we change that? It's because, let's say, the key people who are supposed to scrutinize the the operations of the president are the ones that are appointed by the president. If you can appoint the director of public prosecution, you can appoint the controller and auditors general, you can appoint the National Electoral Commission, you can appoint all of these are your employees. So if they're not doing what's favoring you or befitting them, it means that you can also fire them. So they're not, as much as the Constitution says that they are independent bodies who are not supposed to be influenced by any other party or any other person. But the president, it's contradictory, because you've already given the president the power, the authority to be able to put them in power and fire them. I'll give you a case of the Controller and Auditor General during the Magufuli's regime. So Professor Musa Assad was the Controller and Auditor General, and the Supreme Audit in the United States, that's what we call them. So he made a report that really President Magufuli wasn't really happy with. And then he started getting trouble from his boss, right? Which forced him to either resign or step down. And then hence we got Charles Kichere, who is the current Controller and Auditors General. Now, if I can tell you what what is a qualified audit and what is an unqualified audit and recommend that you work on so and so. And then you tell me, you need to step down because you're questioning me, then why are these people in power? Why don't we have them vie for these places, put out their CVs, and then, like a job interview? Why don't we have that so that the people actually feel that we put you in place? Tanzania has so many documents that are pretty in picture. You will look at them and say, if we did implement this, we would be, as much as we are resource rich, it would reflect with our economy. But all these documents are interfered with politically. Okay, like the prologue, we call it TAMISEMI. It's the one that the ministry that connects the people and the government. Okay, they have so many modules. Devolution by decentralization. They have opportunities and obstacles of development where people can really tell the government, this is what we need. But the moment a political figure comes in there and says, nope, this is not what you need, they go and tell the parliament, this is not what the people need, this is what the people need, because they've been influenced somewhere, then everything changes. There's too much political interference in most of the things that the people need, right? The key. So we need to at least minimize this, reduce the how much the politics can interfere with the lives of people so that people can actually see their rights being exercised, so that people can actually see that this governance, this is what we need. If we followed through the modules that we have, I promise you, during my time working in Tanzania, I was able to work with different ministries. I worked with TAMISEMI, the president's office, regional and local governance, regional administration and local governance. And we were able to learn about a lot of modules that really reflect on the people. But the moment that somebody in politics said, nope, that's not it. It's not it. If we really upheld the rule of law in Tanzania, because our laws are pretty, they need reforms like any other country based on how we're moving, like how the world is moving. But then what we already have, if it's taken into consideration and put in place, I promise the government that we would not be here today.
A question before I get back to the audience questions, a question came to my mind as you were talking. You have a parliamentary system, and that means that the president's party is also the ruling party in the parliament. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, you're correct.
So that there's really not a firewall between the executive branch and the legislative branch.
Absolutely.
So who has the power of the purse in Tanzania? Who decides how the budget will be allocated?
So, okay, so I'll tell you about the budget system in Tanzania, okay? So the local governance authority would have a budget plan, right, during the budget cycle, and then they will table it. And then this will be to the minister. Then the minister would come back according to what the central government. That's why we're talking about decentralization. Central government is saying that this is what needs to be in the national budget. So at the end of the day, the people are really not the ones who have a say on what needs to be on the budget or not. It's the ruling party tabling the budget into the parliament, and the parliament 99.9% is the ruling party. So definitely you're going to get yes. And this started happening, how it came about that 99.9% and the elimination of the opposition party in the parliament started during President Magufuli's second term, where it was a whole Green Party. Nobody would question, everybody would just hit the desk and then everything would pass. No, everything went under the certificate of emergency. And we kept on wondering, why do we need a certificate of emergency? Well, there are people who can sit down and scrutinize this and say, okay, this is actually going to work for people. Anything that they needed to pass, any contract, any document, they'll just go, okay, we're going to call in session certificate of emergency, and it's gone. So really, it's not reflecting what we want. And then usually, because it doesn't really reflect on the needs of the people, when the controller and auditor general comes back with his report at the end of March and tables it, there's so many qualified reports. Okay. And then when they're tabled, it will still the recommendation we will carry forward the recommendation day after day. Like every year we're carrying forward the same recommendation from the previous year of the Controller and Auditor General. We'll carry them to the next year because the ruling party is the majority of the current government. I think this this parliament has maybe three or four opposition parties. And these are opposition parties that most we, okay, so one is from ACT and two are from Chauma, but they're like the minor. ACT will give it a little bit, but Chauma is like minor. Their policies don't, when you listen to what's that word? When you listen to their speeches when they're um, trying to vie for the positions that they have, you can literally say that why do we need this? One time, the president of Chauma said, if I become president, the one who was vying for it, if I become president, everybody will eat rice. Why do we want to eat rice? You know, everybody will eat. And you're saying this is actually a person who is contesting for presidency, telling us that one of his policies is that everybody will eat rice, while we have no water. Our health system suck. I'll say that. Forgive my English. Our roads are horrible. Like I don't know when last you were in Tanzania, but our roads, only the big roads look good. But even when they give contracts to people to construct these roads, there's so much that you're not satisfied with. A road will be constructed today, and then 10 days later, this road has potholes. And we used millions, billions of money to construct the same road. Okay, so there's so much that is happening that people are not even happy with, and you can even you as a person who's governing or the governing bodies cannot even listen to the key recommendation. I'm not saying Charles Kichere, the current CAG, is doing a bad job, but how do we fall through from the recommendations that he gives out? Okay, he's giving out so many useful recommendations, and they're not being worked upon. Even when we come on here or come online, the government should have the power to discernment to discern what they want to listen to and or what is useful, and ignore that what they don't feel is useful. Because if you're just labeling everyone who comes online to speak and speak out and say this is not right, then how many people are going to disappear? How many
Hmm.
people will lose their lives just for trying to tell you this is what we are seeing? We are the people. We see this. If you're not seeing it, work on it. The same energy that they're using to deploy different UVCCM, that's the youth wing of the ruling party, to come to comment sections to distort the conversation is the same energy that they could have used or efforts that they could have used to actually construct what would work and leave out what doesn't. It's the same. It takes the same 2 seconds to do a bad thing to do a good thing.
Wow. Okay, one more question here from the audience. The questioner is thanking you for your courage and expertise. You said that Tanzania is mature in practicing democracy and the country does not need any influence from outside, especially Western countries. Me, as a German with our colonial history, I really want to avoid neo-colonialism. At the same time, we want to be loyal to the Tanzanian diaspora and our friends there who criticize what happened. Actually, even here in Germany, the Tanzanian diaspora are kind of afraid to protest. What do you think other countries, especially the USA or European countries, could or should do? That's a broad question, but give it a try.
Yeah, it is really broad. I don't know. I think I heard he said that that people shouldn't intervene. I think I
Well, I think what the questioner is saying is, what do you think people in other countries outside the US and Europe should do, I think, to help improve the situation? I mean, the questioner referred to the diaspora in Germany who appear to be afraid to speak out. Uh,
Yeah.
I, I, I honestly don't know how large the Tanzanian diaspora here is in the United States, but I've not heard much from it. What do you think
All right.
countries
So,
like the
okay.
US
So,
should do?
yeah, thank you. So before the elections, the Tanzanian community in the United States gathered at the embassy of Tanzania in Washington. They had protests. They protested against the election because everything, all the signs showed that the election would not be free and fair. And the results, honestly speaking, are really shameful, let's say, because I have never heard a country win any candidate in the world, I don't know who, win 98% of the voters. That's 31 million people, which is half of Tanzania's population, according to the census. So you're saying 31 million people voted for you. Okay, never mind. I'm gonna skip that. So the Tanzanian diaspora really did try to speak up, where now everybody in the diaspora has been labeled that they are the ones that are influencing the Tanzanian youth to protest, as if the Tanzanian youth do not see their problems or do not live through those problems. I think we need to really stop, because in other words, it's like you're calling us young people, I'm sorry, stupid, that we can't think for ourselves unless somebody else thinks for us, right? So people live through it takes a lot of courage to get out there and actually say, we've been trying to do dialogues and we're trying to do everything, but now you're not hearing us. Let's get on the streets and try to protest um, peacefully. But even that, you're given a life sentence where you a death sentence where you just get shot and die, which really could have been avoided. So the Tanzanian, to answer your question, the Tanzanian diaspora have really tried here in the United States. I've seen in Canada. I've also seen in Sweden. They've tried. The the United States in general, we have relations in with Tanzania. You know, the United States have relations. Germany has relations with Tanzania. I believe that their country, their presidents or prime ministers can do something. It can give an not an order, but can give a what's the other word that's not order?
Pressure.
Hmm, can
Oh,
tell.
strong suggestion.
Yeah, I can suggest that their embassies, their embassy heads or the ambassadors can speak to the president. What's going on? We know what not. We don't want to influence. We don't want to say that we are getting influence from outer like other countries, and that's what they're saying. All of this is influence because some people are being paid. Like I would be labeled that I'm being paid by someone while I'm doing this for free. That to disturb the political stability in Tanzania. Okay. So I believe that through dialogues, right? Not guns, through dialogues, we can change things. Through conversation, we would be able to pick up one and two, like learning from different countries like Kenya, for instance. How did they go about this? You know, if the president sat with the president of Kenya, perhaps, and say, okay, Kenya had protested in 2009, yeah, 2007 or 2009, 2007. And then they protested last year, earlier this year or last year. So how do you go about this? You know, because now that's going to be a new norm. You not listening to the people is actually giving them courage enough to speak up, to get Tanzanians, we are peaceful. We before this, we never spoke. We were like, as long as there's peace in the country, let them be corrupt. It's okay. As long as there's peace in the country. But then if people are disappearing, where is the peace? If people are being put in prison for treason just because they protested against the government that they feel is failing them, and protesting is a right in the a constitutional right, then where is the peace? You can't, like again, I said, you can't speak peace without speaking rights. If I am denied my right to leave and you're telling me that that is peace, then I don't know how you're defining peace. So influence from by dialogues, right? We've been holding dialogues and we shouldn't get tired of holding dialogues. We hold dialogues for everything. Learn from others. Our country can learn, can take good case studies from other countries that have gone through this. I saw Indonesia, the people protested and people were jumping on the police, but those police just held their shields up and no one was shot. So why can't we do that? This whole violence was so uncalled for, really inhumane and disturbing is the least, but it could have been avoided. And I hear that or I've seen online that people are going to protest again in December on the Independence Day, December 9th. I hope we learn from this. Because if it's a constitutional right, why shouldn't people want to be heard? People are still hurting. They want to be heard. Let them protest, but think, how are we best going to protect the people? How are we not going to see them as the enemy of the state? Okay? Because it's valid for them to do it. They felt that we feel like we're not heard. So even this past protest, it was valid because we felt like we were not heard. So now, as a country, we have to look at ways forward on how to protect our people so that it doesn't repeat itself. Because if you do it again with the intention to scare people, you're going to raise more people who are not afraid of anything. And this generation right now, I tell you what, Ray, this generation right now is not afraid of anything.
I assume by when you say this generation, you're talking about Generation Z,
I'm talking about Generation Z.
which is featured very prominently in some rather revolutionary events on the continent of late. Um, I'd like you to go into that a little more. Just what is the role that Generation Z is playing right now in Tanzania? Not the
Generation
diaspora, but on the ground in Tanzania.
Generation Z right now is well informed. Generation Z is not our millennial generation. I'm a millennial. It's not boomers. They are well informed, outspoken, and they do like to hold people accountable. So no matter how much you say that you will silence them, they will not back down. I tell you that. And the main people who went to the streets were Generation Z. And the people who published the videos during the election time were the same people. So we have, and Generation Z is school graduates who are unemployed, most of them do not live in the high, because the majority of Tanzania is not the wealthy. The majority of Tanzania is people who are living in poverty. So Generation Z are people who have been crying out for the government to look at them. They are people who some have tried to join the army and then have never been called to station or work, are people who have finished universities but have no jobs, are people who want to see change in the country because the country has been ruled with the same people throughout the years. If you go right now to look at the lineup of the ministers, it's the same names. Same names. The same names from since 1977 up to date. The father was the president, the son will come into becoming a president or something. It's not a crime, yes. But then how do you want us to trust that there will be change if I'm seeing the same people? The mother, now I just saw online that President Samia has appointed her daughter as a deputy minister of education. Okay. So how are we going to hold each other accountable if there is conflict of interest? So the Generation Z is tired of seeing all of that, and I'm not we. I say online that I'm Generation Z by baptism. So we Generation Z want to see change occur. We want to hold people accountable without being labeled as the enemy. And when we hold people accountable, it's because we are the one who allegedly put you into power.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have no more questions, and I hope our audience has been as enlightened by this as I have. I want to really thank you, Imam Hatibu, for your impassioned presentation on the situation in Tanzania, and with the hopes that the dreams that you clearly have will come true very soon. I want to thank our audience for being with us today and remind everyone that the recording of this event will be made available on YouTube within the next 24 to 48 hours. Again, I want to thank you all for your appearance and your participation with us today. Thank our panelists for an outstanding presentation and look forward to seeing all of you here. We have another event scheduled for the 19th. We'll be talking about the situation with the demise of AGOA and what impact that has on the continent. And we look forward to you joining us for that. Thank you very much and see you all next time.
Can I, sorry, before we
Uh,
all go, can I just make a call to our government, if anyone in the government is here listening today? We we really need to stop. Like I said earlier on, that we feel like as Tanzanians that we have a death sentence. Right now, I don't think I'll be able to go back to Tanzania in the next 5 years or so. Because even if somebody died in Tanzania, I don't think I'll be able to, just because I chose to speak up. And it shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't. It's really, we've lived in peace, and then just for that to change by somebody's snap of a finger, it doesn't make any sense. How to move forward from now onward is, first, let the people mourn in peace. This whole scaring everyone, stop posting, stop sharing, stop this, is really not helping. Inflicting fear into people is not helping anyone, and we cannot move forward. It shows us that you're dishonest and you not care about the people. And what we want to see is a government that cares about the people. The people who died in several regions in Tanzania are not just people who were based in Dar es Salaam. Nobody's actually from originally from Dar es Salaam. There's people from different parts of Tanzania coming into the country, I mean, to the cities, so that they can find better lives for themselves. So it's really, everybody's mourning in Tanzania. It's the whole of Tanzania. So let's grace people with peace. The government should grace people with the freedom to mourn and bury their loved ones before we even start dialogues, before we even start with investigations, before we even start with anything. It shouldn't be business as usual. This is serious. It's a call for peace, but a call for change as well. So that's what I wanted to say. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. You couldn't have said it better. Look for and good luck to you in the future.